Thomas, a persuasive speaking from manual, project number 5. Sue at 6 to 8 minutes.
Thank you.
Anita wrote her speech yesterday afternoon with no intention of delivering it this morning. She was engrossed in the NFL controversy of players taking a knee during the playing of the National Anthem, and this promoted her to think back to all the peaceful protests this country has witnessed. These musings inspired her thoughts today and renewed her belief in the right we are granted under the Second Amendment. Anita hopes you will be inspired to examine your own feelings on this important topic. Please welcome Anita Thomas.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
The title of my speech is Taking a Knee. I was moved to talk about the recent kerfuffle regarding President Trump demanding that the owners of NFL teams fire players who refused to stand during the playing of the National Anthem. He even went so far as to call those protesting players SOBs. And it was fascinating to learn that the playing of the anthem before an NFL game was now must-watch TV. Instead of taking place off camera while commercials were being run, or while the broadcasters in the booth were talking about who's had the best chance of winning the game that day, we were riveted to our screens. Who would stand? Who would take a knee? How would the fans react? Would there be jeers? Would there be cheers? One team chose to stay in the tunnel during the anthem to avoid all this, but they did have one player emerge to place his hand over his heart, and that player was a former serviceman, a former military man. Year before last, when then 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick was the first to use this tactic to silently protest his anger at the treatment of many blacks at the hands of police, I had very mixed reactions about this. So it forced me to examine my feelings about this form of protest. It was shocking to me, and perhaps it was to many of you. It wasn't the same as burning a flag, but still, it was shocking. Wow, you're not going to stand? For being the first to risk the nation's condemnation in this way, Kaepernick has paid a steep price. Once considered one of the NFL's top players, top quarterbacks, he remains to this day unemployed. Not a single NFL team has picked him up. And that's a little odd, since this past weekend, about 100 players have followed his example. And odder still, many team owners are standing, figuratively standing, in solidarity with their players' right to protest in this way. And this brings me to the heart of this matter. Civics Lesson 101. The Second Amendment guarantees us 5 cherished rights. Freedom of religion, and that's the freedom to be a believer or a non-believer. Freedom of speech. A free press, my cherished fourth estate, the free press. The right to peaceably assemble and petition the government for a redress of grievances. I'm watching Ken Burns and Lynn Novick's amazing documentary on Vietnam. And for those of you lucky enough to have come of age in the 60s, as I did, you will remember there were flag burnings. Now that is a shocking act to witness. It breaks your heart, and it turns your stomach. But we're hearing today, and we heard it then, military personnel, servicemen and women who fought in that misguided war and others since, they're speaking out and reminding us that they were fighting for our right to burn the flag. It's amazing. In one of the most memorable scenes from the Vietnam documentary so far that I have watched, I listened as a North Vietnamese Army veteran talked about how Hanoi used news footage of our protests back here at home as propaganda for their war efforts. Proof that we would lose the war because the American people back home did not even believe that we should be there. He said, we were using this as proof of your country's weakness. But I knew all along, he said, it was proof of your strength. In Russia, in North Korea, in China, not in America, journalists disappeared. Protesters are murdered on public streets or poisoned as warnings to anyone who would dare petition the government to redress their grievances. It appears that many NFL owners have checked their pocket copies of the Constitution and realized perhaps that by standing with their players, they're siding with what's right and what's guaranteed to us as American citizens, no matter our race, no matter our color, or anything else. And if you've heard owner Jerry Jones make the argument that this is not the place, well, I would suggest that it's their powerful position as well-paid athletes in this football-crazy nation of ours to use this as a public platform to protest the unequal treatment of those who have no voice at all. We've read and heard and spoken ourselves a lot about what we really need to do during this extreme hyper-partisanship that we're seeing is sit down with others who hold an opposite view and talk about why we hold the views and values we did. And Phil and I had a little conversation, a little mini conversation along those lines right before this meeting started. And then we should listen to what our neighbors, our colleagues, our fellow Toastmasters, and in many cases, our own family members have to say about what they think and feel. If there's one thing we learn as Toastmasters, it's how to listen. We really listen. We don't pretend to listen while we form a rebuttal in our minds. Listen and then do the hardest thing there is. Try to imagine yourself in this other person's skin. Instead of attacking protesting players, wouldn't it have been amazing if President Trump had invited a few owners and select players, those who would agree to come, to sit down with him and explain why they're frustrated enough to take a knee during the anthem? I cannot imagine that that was an easy decision for any of them to make. If he were to do this and truly listen, he could dispel at once accusations that he's a racist. LeBron James is emerging as a spokesman, and Trump should definitely reach out to him. Instead, he fans the flames. What's going on today in our country is not pretty. It's often ugly, it's messy, and its roots and causes are myriad and complicated. I think we'd all agree that having a conversation where we listen with empathy and compassion to the other side will go a long way to bridge the divide between kneeling and standing.